Both Yuki and Kashimo, huh? This'll be fun. What's up, guys? I love Hunter here, and here we are to do a breakdown / live reaction and review and analysis of Malik Syv's The Wasted Potential of Yuki and Kashimo. JJK analysis. And I'm very intrigued, very excited. This is my first vid of Malik Syv's. I saw it pop up. I've already liked. I've already subscribed. I seem intrigued. Obviously, you know, I've made my own videos talking about the wasted potential of Kashimo, the wasted potential of Yuki Tsukumo, hypothetically, the whole narrative reasons, stuff like that. But I'm very interested to see what Malik Syv has to say. This is my first video of theirs, but I don't know. I saw like 5 seconds of the video and it already looked pretty gas. So let's not waste any more time and let's hop right into it. Editing me, I summon you to this plane of reality. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
JJK.
What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, I do happen to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. And another fun fact. Did you know that I like to yap quite extensively? So extensively, in fact, that please check out the link to the original video. It'll be in the description down below to both Malik Syv's, I was about to say original channel, to Malik Syv's channel, and also the link to the original video. Go run it up, go like it up, and do that because I'm going to yap. We're talking about Yuki and Kashimo, 2 of my favorite characters that barely get any screen time. You know we're going to be here for a minute yapping. So obviously check out the original if you don't want to peep this, or if you want to peep this without my yapping, because I'm going to be yapping for a minute. Speaking of yapping, though, Yuki and Kashimo. Here's the thing. I need y'all to hear me out. Legally speaking, both of these characters serve their narrative roles to their fulfilled function. Like, legally speaking, it's kind of hard, if not impossible, to give both of these characters more with where they're placed in the narrative and what is what is available at the time narratively. For Yuki, because I think she's, we'll do Kashimo, because Kashimo's arguably, if not just flat out, the easier one to tackle, considering his lack of investment and how much the series spends time on him. Kashimo literally exists. I'm telling you, he exists for 2 narrative purposes. 1, to drastically expedite the culling games for our main cast. He was introduced with 200 points and then dropped 100 points to literally show us, hey, this is the kind of guy that's not only monstrous, but also can allow us to kickstart the plot massively. Since he started with so many points, we didn't have to watch our characters slaughter 20 or 100 people. That's his first narrative role, and his second narrative role is to make Sugino look strong. Real strong. Omega strong. I've talked about this before, but the main thing I view Kashimo for is the cycle of jobbing. The jobbing of a character in order to make Sukuna appear more powerful. Jogo did it, Gojo did it, and Kashimo did it. Kashimo, ultimately, his narrative purpose was to be the greatest jobber in all of history, and he was. He was the strongest of his era. Good stuff, good stuff. He was untouched, unviable in terms of any sort. Well, no, he viewed everyone else as unviable because of his overwhelming power. We went down that entire route, similar narrative to Gojo and Sukuna, and we ultimately had him be so powerful, have him fight one of our heavy hitters in Akari Kenji, who's supposedly stronger than Yuta Okotsu and on a roll, and Kashimo and I immediately get folded in base, all to show that Kashimo's really, really strong. So when he gets low diff by Sukuna, everyone goes crazy. True form Sukuna is really that powerful. He truly is divine. He's perfection. Bada bing, bada boom. He exists to expedite the narrative and to glaze. Those are Kashimo's 2 purposes. And logistically speaking, he fulfills those perfectly. No one, and I mean no one, even the greatest, craziest, most next level Kashimo creamers, even the greatest Kenjaku jackers, the Jaku jackers out there, like me, who believed he was going to be the final villain, not a single one of us was actually convinced that if Gojo Satoru fell, Kashimo Hajime was going to be the one to defeat Ryo and Sukuna. No one believed that. So the moment he said in his introduction that the one thing he wanted to do was fight Ryo and Sukuna, we knew from round start years ago that Kashimo was going to do nothing but fall. He performed his narrative purpose to the letter, to the T. So legally speaking, he doesn't have wasted potential, because what else can you give him in the narrative? Another fight? Where? In the 1-month time skip? With who? Who would fight Kashimo during that time point? And who would Kashimo fight? Was he going to fight Gojo? Why? He wants to fight Sukuna, and only Sukuna. It would just be base Kashimo versus Gojo, and I don't think I need to explain to you that Gojo washes. That would just be more jobbing for Kashimo. We're gonna get an Akari v Kashimo rematch. We may get sparring sessions, but if that, Kashimo's not allowed to use half his kit, because half his kit is lethal. And by half his kit, I literally mean the bowl. What? Yuta versus Kashimo? Why would they fight? They literally have no reason to contest each other. Yuta's not even the strongest of his era. He's the second strongest, so Kashimo would have no interest in him. And there are no other Culling Games opponents. You would have to make up more to give Kashimo more. First curse technique, yeah, I agree. It's a bit unfortunate that we don't get to see a maximum, a domain, any reverse curse technique or anything. He doesn't even seem to have a reverse curse technique. That's awful, that's horrid, but like, he just doesn't. And there's no point in giving him all that. If anything, giving Mythic Phantom Beast Amber all that extra hype is just built to do what Kashimo was built for, which was to glaze Sukuna, make him seem all the mightier, all the juicier, all the more jacked and scrumdiddlyumptious, which it did. Sukuna body bagging Kashimo worked in terms of making Sukuna appear unstoppable. So Kashimo technically has no wasted narrative potential. But, that aside, I do think more could have been done with the character. You would just have to make up more, innately. And that's kind of the same thing with Yuki. Yuki is arguably even worse than Kashimo in terms of waste potential, because, like, she's around for a lot longer. Kashimo's a character who gets introduced, I believe, like 80 chapters after Yuki does. And even then, that's not even true. Yuki gets introduced very early on to the series. Yuki, unironically, gets introduced during the Goodwill arc. Like, first 50 chapters of the series. And she was the final special grade that we had no information on. But she was placed up against Kenjaku. And no one believed that she was going to beat Kenjaku. Even with Tengen, even with Choso there. We all knew. Even if you didn't think Kenjaku was the main villain like I did at the time, dog, be real with me. Did you really think Yuki stood a chance? No. And unfortunately, that was her narrative role. She was meant to be strong, meant to be powerful, just to set up Kenny. And show how powerful Kenny is. Even though we already knew how powerful Suguru Getsu was, he didn't really have a proper fight outside of Yuji after Shibuya when he was super fatigued. So Kenny needed a fight, he needed a jobber, and Yuki was the ultimate jobber. And ultimately, you can't even really say Yuki had no narrative impact. Without Yuki, there's no Todo. Without Todo, there's no Yuji. At least not as we know him. Not the Black Flash merchant we know today. Yuki's responsible for the Soul Book. Without that, the narrative would not be going as it is. Yuki's still very, very important, but she just doesn't get to do much. That's kind of the whole tale of Yuta, or Yuki and Kashimo. They have massive narrative importance. The Culling Games would have lasted way longer if it wasn't for Kashimo. And Sukuna would not be as powerful, or not at least seem as powerful and as unstoppable and as perfect if it wasn't for Kashimo. And at the same time, Yuji would not be a tenth of the character he is today without Yuki. But the characters just don't get to show everything. They don't get to show their full kits. They don't really get a good fight to show off their full kits. And ultimately, they were destined to die. It's unfortunate, but it be like that when it be like that, especially when it be like that. So yeah, I agree, they have wasted potential, but I do think they serve both of their narrative roles perfectly. If anything, Yuki got way more than what I expected from her narrative role. Like, straight up. As a character with like 2% screen time in the entire 256 at the time of recording, but 257 leaks have dropped by the time of recording this. And the entire 257 run, Yuki's one of the most important characters to the current state of the narrative, even earlier states in the narrative. She's one of the most important characters in the narrative, but she gets like no screen time. So she gets more. She's one of the heaviest, like, proportionally weighted characters in my opinion, in terms of how much screen time she got versus how much she actually did. That's crazy, but it actually is the case. Because she did a whole lot in very little screen time. But enough of my incessant yapping. Let's let Malik cook a little bit.
Is filled to the brim with a lot of formidable threats, and be it current or ancient sorcerers, many have become fan favorites. Amongst these characters, two in particular stand out: Culling Game's strongest player Hajime Kashimo, and Jujutsu Society's mysterious special grade sorcerer Yuki Tsukumo. In possessing such titles, one can't help but wonder how they would influence the story, their full power, and how far they would go when all is said and done. Unfortunately for both Kashimo and Yuki, by the end of their stories, they would feel left behind by the narrative. Almost like they were wasted. Making her official entrance into the story in chapter 76, all is said.
Hold on, I'm sorry, the Yu-Gi-Oh fan in me is gonna go back and peep these ratings. I mean, ain't nothing all too inaccurate. I like Maki being above Yuta though. Kashimo having perfect defense and offense is crazy. But I guess, really, he is actually kind of bulky. Sukuna, wow. I guess, I get giving Gojo more defensive stats because of the infinity and stuff like that, but I'd say Sukuna is definitely bulkier than Gojo. If anything, I see Sukuna as like one of the god cards. Like I'm thinking of Obelisk, the Tormentor, and like, how it has just 4,000, 4,000? Like their stats are perfectly even in terms of offense and defense because they're literally perfect. I'd see that for Sukuna. And Gojo, if anything, I'd give him more of a defensive leaning. But then again, Gojo could also definitely be like equal stats or more to attack potency because of how crazy he is. Hirozu being above Akari, I know people aren't going to like that one. Maharaga being high, that makes sense, especially that Maharaga. Yuki having 3,000? I'd actually give her a boost a bit. I'd probably give her 3,500 in terms of just straight attack because that's realistically all she is. That's the thing. A lot of Yuki's defenses are offense based. It's crazy to think about it that way, but she really is the culmination of the best defense is a good offense. Because her whole conceptual negation thing only happens when she's sending things outwards. Garuda negated the concept manipulation of the elephant curse, but something as simple as the cursed energy blast from Uzumaki weren't able to be negated by Yuki because she wasn't attacking. So I do agree her attack should be higher than her defense, but ultimately I'd lean more towards giving Yuki way more attack than defense. That's just a 200 difference. Kenji Hikari should definitely have infinitely more defense. He should have darn near infinite defense and very, very low offense. I know that's bad. But once again, he's not. I'm not gonna say he's a confirmed pillow puncher. His opponents are just really, really strong. But I don't know, man. It's hard to give Hikari much credit for much of anything in terms of offense. But defensively, yeah, he's arguably. No, he's not even arguably. He has the best RCT in the series. So while his bulk isn't the highest, his longevity is crazy. Maki 3,200. Yeah, I agree. Yuta, honestly, I'd also give Yuta a lot more credit to his bulk. Though, admittedly, he's also kind of in a Gojo and Sukuna category where his overall stats are just really, really good. For offense, defense, speed. I'll give Yuta credit. He's very, very well balanced. And Kenny being 3,300 in attack, 3,000 defense. Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that. Because Kenny's strong defensively, but a big thing of Kenny is his variety of offenses. So yeah, alright, these are nice little stuff here. I like it. The Yu-Gi-Oh fan of me, toes? Curl. Let's see.
Or ancient sorcerers, many have become one can't help but wonder how they would influence the story.
Who do y'all got in this matchup too? I'll probably make a video talking about it, but I give it to Kashimo easily. I don't really see Yuki being Kashimo. But once again, it's just because Yuki's scaling is so... It's so mid. Okay, let me not say that. But it is very rough for Yuki. But especially CT Kashimo, he literally sneezes in her general direction. I think she vaporizes. But let's see.
Their full power and how far they would go when all is said and done. Unfortunately for both Kashimo and Yuki, by the end of their stories, they would feel left behind by the narrative. Almost like they were wasted. Making her official entrance into the story in Chapter 76, Yuki is labeled as a no-good special grade who just bums around overseas and doesn't take on mission.
See that? Chapter 76. Y'all, Kashimo doesn't get introduced to the 150. Well, maybe not the 150. I think it's actually is the 150s. Kashimo doesn't get introduced until that late. So Yuki's established in the narrative almost 100 chapters, 75-ish chapters before Kashimo is. Y'all really thought Kashimo was going to get something good? Come on now, but let's see.
An interesting way to introduce one of the story's top tiers during this time, as we understand that special grades tend to be busy doing actual Jujutsu sorcery work. Until her motivation is understood in her efforts to rid the world of cursed spirits, communicating her bigger picture approach to her job in contrast to patching up the wounds left behind by said cursed spirits. Her 3 propositions to achieve her goal educate us on her character and how it is to be perceived, not as someone who is just lazy for laziness' sake, but rather as someone who's actively trying to make a better world. At the same time, she does not oppose entertaining more radical ideas like killing all non-sorcerers. This does 2 things. 1, it inspires Geto's eventual outlook on the world, and 2, shows Yuki is willing to see morbid ideas for their efficacy. Granted, killing all non-sorcerers has some serious moral implications if taken flight, but teaching everyone to control cursed energy isn't exactly a far better alternative. Possibilities of multiple people with high aptitude for Jujutsu like Higuruma would cause all sorts of problems for the world. Yuki more than likely understands this to be a possibility and has to choose the lesser of two evils. Not to mention herself, Gojo, Geto, and other high-grade sorcerers could perform crowd control, so not too many new sorcerers would run rampant. Yuki's next appearance is in Shibuya, where she has a bit of a debate.
It is interesting, the catch-22 that Yuki's put in when it comes to eradicating curses, eradicating the source. Ultimately, yeah, it's kind of like the big issue where if we, as a species, just randomly develop superpowers. Yo, without superpowers, we're already menaces. Like, I always joke about if we randomly found out we were Kryptonians, or we just woke up one day as Kryptonians, the planet wouldn't last the day. It wouldn't. If everyone were to become even like grade 2 or grade 3 or grade 4 Jujutsu sorcerers, if just the average guy was superhuman, it would not be a safe place. So I do get why Yuki's idea of like teaching people cursed energy control is not necessarily the best, especially like mentioned with those freak exceptions. Imagine how many Takabas there are. If curse techniques lie dormant in characters, imagine how many Takabas there are. How many reality warpers, time manipulators, space manipulators. Like, it could get way too crazy. So I understand. I do like the way he's tackling it. The idea of, like, Yuki was kind of put in an impossible scenario. And the best way to make everything work is to take away any superness from anybody. By completely eradicating cursed energy, by liberating it. But then again, you still run into the same issue. Because then everyone becomes superhuman. But then I guess you can't really destroy the world. Because, like, Toji, I mean, he could. He could run about. But if everyone's Toji level, then no one is. Everyone's super, no one is. On some Incredibles type beat. So yeah, ultimately, I do think Yuki's solution was the best. And I still believe Yuki isn't at fault for Geto being absolutely crazy. She humors it, but she's like, no. She's very specifically against the loss of extreme amounts of life. And you can tell that by the fact that while she doesn't undertake traditional jujutsu work, she did train Todo. She took Todo under her wing and was like, okay, I'm going to make you powerful enough that you can help deal with curses and stop them on your own. And we know that she isn't fully against, she's actually pretty against the idea of just like sacrificing all non-sorcerers because she's against the merger as a concept. She doesn't want that to happen. She doesn't want millions of people to be sacrificed. So I don't think Yuki was at all in support of the idea. She just acknowledged that that technically is a possibility. Because, once again, she thought Geto was actually sane and was speaking in a proposition where she was like, I mean, yeah, by technicality, you're right. It's kind of like, it's the conundrum of like, hey, how do we stop all human issues? Well, no more humans. Like, yeah, I mean, technically that's right, but, like, we don't want to do that because we're human. So, I can see the conundrum, the catch-22. But I don't think Yuki should be blamed. I see, especially recently, a lot of people have been like, if it wasn't for Yuki, Geto never would have went down that path. Geto was destined to go crazy. That man, I'll admit, Yuki was the straw that broke the camel's back, but, well, actually, no, the straw that broke the camel's back was Nanako and Mimiko. But, still, Yuki, she's not responsible for it. But let's
against
see.
Kenjaku about how to use cursed energy. Her reaffirmed desire to break away from cursed energy came about due to bigger nations more than likely using the Japanese populace as a power source. Naturally, this would result in a
See, that's another level to it. Once again, while I don't think Yuki actually genuinely believed in sacrificing people like that, she did not want that to happen. She was like, very specifically did not want humans to be turned into batteries, essentially. Whether they be Japanese or not, whether they be sorcerer or not, she didn't want that. Which shows that she generally does have care for human life. Yuki is not a person detached from humanity in a way that something like a Ryuman Tsukino or a Kenjaku or even a Akari Kinji is. No, she still believes in the value of life and the value of interpersonal connection. Which is what I think it makes her an interesting character, because she is willing to acknowledge all roots, even if she has a preference for certain roots, and a willingness to disregard other roots because of their hypothetical dangers. That's why she directly opposes Kenjaku, breaking away versus optimization of. It's interesting.
She is completely against, defining her character to be one we can sympathize with, all the while placing her as Kenjaku's ideological opposition. A development that comfortably brings us to chapters 202 through 208. Yuki versus Kenjaku is the fall of her character, figuratively and literally. She and Kenny were never equals in intelligence, strength, or otherwise. Kenjaku's knowledge and understanding of his goal had always been superior to Yuki's own. He's experienced multiple lifetimes with one singular desire in mind, to force humanity's evolution by creating a chaos even he could not control. Take this and compare it to Yuki, who remained indecisive in her own pursuits of a single goal. Kenny braved the road no matter what appeared before him. He failed for years, waiting for the stars to align in his favor. Yuki lacks this drive to accomplish her goal of ridding the world of cursed energy, embodying her title as a lazy special grade in that regard. She needed to match Kenjaku's drive for her to force humanity's departure from cursed energy. Their fight, as one would guess, displays this perfectly, as Kenjaku has an answer to everything Yuki pulls out against him. I like to think of this as a live debate of their respective outlooks. Kenjaku, being the far more experienced with this topic and approach, beats down Yuki with his initial arguments, but Yuki manages to make some meaningful counters that strip his argument's foundation until he slips out of it because of his greater knowledge and understanding. I know it may seem like a strange way to express a fight, but all fights are basically physical arguments if you really think about it. Another point of discussion is Choso. Yuki treats him with due respect.
That is I didn't even think about it that way. But yeah, that is a man. More your videos are on the docket, my friend. More your videos are on the docket. I see a vision now. But yeah, I didn't think about it that way. Approaching Yuki and Kenjaku's fight as a direct battle of ideologies. Well, of course, a lot of JJK battles are battles of ideologies, like whether it be Yuji versus Mahito, Choso versus Yuji, Todo versus Yuji. Like, a lot of the fights are ideological battles, but to literally see that in the form of a genuine debate that would happen verbally, happening physically, it does actually really make sense. And it adds that extra layer. And once again, it goes into the idea, I love how he lays into it goes into the idea that Yuki was never going to win in any way, shape, or form. And a similar reason to why Tengen was never going to resist. Why Tengen could never resist. Because Yuki just isn't well-lived enough. She doesn't have enough experience. She doesn't have enough knowledge. She doesn't have enough determination. Kenjaku took back shots for the plan, yo. Numerous. Countless. You know Jin was getting in them guts like crazy. All for the sake of the plan. All according to Keikaku. That is everything Kenny did for just the Keikaku. And then, of course, 1,000 years of attempts of trying and focus. None of those deterred her. Meanwhile, like he mentions, someone like Yuki, after not being able to interview Toji, kind of just sat on it for 10 years. Never really had an answer or anything in terms of breaking away from cursed energy. She never even had a plan. She just had the idea. She had a problem. She wanted to solve it. But outside of steps that stopped happening a decade ago, she never worked to try and find a solution. Meanwhile, Kenny is implied to have multiple times in multiple ways trying to force that merger, trying to get that answer, trying to do anything, use every single resource possible to avoid the eyes of fate in the Six Eyes, stop the star plasma vessels, get to Tengen. There's been so much work and active progress made by Kenny, while Yuki basically stagnated 10 years ago after running into Toji. So yeah, of course, someone who stagnates, someone who doesn't live, someone who's lazy would never be able to defeat someone so active, someone so proactive, someone who has all these years of experience in combat and understanding and realization and development and a true, proper, galvanized version of their grand plan, their ideology. Kenny knows exactly what he was going to do. Meanwhile, Yuki, all she was doing was fighting to maintain a fragile and even broken system. She was part of that system. And ultimately, of course, she would fall to it. So yeah, that's really, really good. And once again, it even comes into the level of refinement of their domains and the idealization of individuality versus union. In a way, Kenjaku, through living all those different lives, despite being an individual, through his many lives experience and obviously cursed spirit manipulation, Kenjaku didn't really stand alone. So even while he technically got jumped in 3v1, Kenjaku was drastically outnumbering them in terms of everything else. Intellectually, physically, curse technique wise, Kenny was just him. I never thought, man. Wow, let's gonna stick in the dome for a while now, but let's see.
To helping him come to the solution of his own personal crises, whereas Kenjaku tries to sink him deeper into his misery. Yuki liberates his soul versus Kenjaku's restricting of it, furthering Yuki's opposition to him as a character. Although I've sung Yuki's praises, her
And notably, that also, we're about to go into the ways of potential Yuki. Okay. And notably, doubling down on that, if we're focusing on the treatment of Choso as the liberation versus constraint and optimization, that's also a further extension. Yuki, by breaking Choso free, we're letting him perish as a curse and then be reborn as a man. Ultimately, that's, once again, Yuki kind of being lazy. Yuki kind of just leaving Choso to do what it do, how Choso would do it. There's no active effort in that. She sent Choso away, but, like, that was mainly Tengen. Yuki didn't really do much. She told him to, but that was something that was just passive and only something that happened in the moment. Meanwhile, Kenny has been degrading and using Choso ever since Choso was Choso. And ultimately optimizing Choso's lack of ability and inability to grow and evolve as an individual to his advantage, from stomping on him to insulting him. Ultimately, he was optimizing the negativity that he was using in Choso's direction. Where before it was passive, Kenjaku's always one to evolve certain things. And he evolved the hatred, evolved the agony, evolved the distress and disconcert between the two. So evolution and optimization versus separation and liberation. It really goes down. Yo, these angles, bro. Man, I think I've gotten a much deeper appreciation for this fight. And I already like it. I already like it a lot. I do just think, Yuki was destined to fail.
Downfall that I mentioned comes packaged with her importance. She is portrayed to be quite a knowledgeable person who could have reached Kenjaku's level given time and dedication. However, he had the necessary ability to continue his dream beyond his original body. Yuki didn't, begging the question of why she didn't try to pass on her goal to Todo or anyone else for that matter. She flirted with the idea of heavenly restriction, but of her own admission states cases of it are too few and far between to be a reliable avenue to pursue. This leaves only one way for her to see her goal realized, that being a solution she could find within her lifetime capable of affecting everyone on a global scale. Not only this, but something everyone would agree to, and with the complexity of Jujutsu Kaisen's world and characters, I don't think it would be the easiest solution to come across. Instead of developing a path to making her ideal world, her journey is cut short to amplify Kenjaku's own ideals. Yuki feels genuinely unfinished. We get her backstory, her plan of attack, fight, and death all within 6 chapters. For comparison, Yuta got an entire volume dedicated to him and a battle royale that lasted 6 chapters. Geto also had similar spotlight and a backstory arc, and I don't think I have to speak on Gojo's screen time. Every single special grade sorcerer is treated as an essential piece of the story, whilst Yuki is just a gatekeeper who couldn't win so the story could continue. Speaking of her fight with Kenjaku, I'm just going to say it. I wish Choso died instead of Yuki. Choso's character arc had reached its natural conclusion, so dying in an effort to kill his...
Okay, so we're going to do that. Let's talk about, Yuki in comparison. Notably, I agree. In terms of screen time and relative narrative weight, Yuki gets nothing compared to the fellow special grades. Yuta Kotsu, like you said, is the original main character. Gojo Satoru, fundamentally important to the way the world is structured. Even Suguru Geto gets a massive whole chunk of an arc dedicated to him that Yuki is a part of, and Yuki just gets nothing. But, notably, the reason why I still think it somewhat makes sense is because what's a good example of this? With wasted potential like this, you would have to add more. You have to give Yuki her own colony. You have to space it out more. You have to dedicate more time to her. When ultimately, she's just not that important. Despite being so important. Her being the final special grade. Her being so mysterious that even Kenjaku, Big Jaku didn't know about her. All that's massive. That's hefty, chunky, scrumptious amounts of narrative weight that is naturally built upon her. But we can't say that she didn't do things. Like I said, she's the reason Choso's still alive right now, and Choso's coming clutch, especially in the recent couple chapters of the manga. We have her to thank for Yuji having the soul-seizing punches in the first place. Without her, that wouldn't be the case. The reason Todo exists, the reason that Yuji was able to survive the back half of the narrative on terms of numerous occasions, whether it be against Hanami, whether it be against Mahito, whether it be Yuji even getting up against Mahito, it's all because of Todo, who only exists in the Jutsu world because of Yuki. So I agree, relative to her narrative weight, her screen time is horrifically lacking. And the amount of time dedicated to her is also horrifically lacking. In fact, this 6 chapter span where she gets to fight, quote unquote, is mainly a Choso and Kenjaku fight. Yuki shows up as an accent piece that admittedly has the ideological battle, which Choso doesn't have, but as seen, her character essentially just feeds to Choso's character. Her character feeds other characters. Todo, Yuji, Choso, everybody else. And that's the unfortunate thing. She's a character meant to do things for other characters. And it's to the point where I say a character with wasted potential is someone you can remove and the narrative doesn't really change. Like, nothing really changes. A big character with wasted potential is like a fat chunk of 1A from My Hero Academia. You cut that class down to the 5 essential characters from it, and basically nothing changes. Maybe 7 essential characters. Everything else is whatever. And they can be off at any moment, and nothing really changes in the narrative. But with someone like Yuki, you can't pluck her out. She's too important. She does too much. No Yuki, no Todo. No Todo, no Yuji. No Yuki, no soul-seizing punches. No soul-seizing punches, no beating Sukuna. No Yuki, no Choso. No Choso, no Yuji learning blood manipulation. Or having the ability to use piercing blood in Supernova. Like, she is way too important to remove. That's the thing. Heck, who knows? Once again, maybe, I don't think it's the case, but you could even make an argument, like a lot of Ghetto fans do, that without Yuki, there's no Ghetto. And no Ghetto means no JJK 0, and no JJK 0 means no Yuta. No Yuta means a bath of things. So Yuki's really, really, really important. And technically, we drew out, at least in my opinion, in a way, despite her having wasted potential in terms of we're not seeing her full kit, in terms of her not getting the same respect or accolades or screen time as her fellow special grades, all that and more. I agree with that, but ultimately I can't say that she's like a true example of wasted potential, because everything the character does is too necessary for the narrative, to the point where you can't remove her without issue. For having Choso die instead of Yuki, I agree yet simultaneously disagree. It gets crazy. Because here's the thing, right? As interesting as Yuki is as a direct character foil to Kenjaku, the issue is that Yuki doesn't necessarily have a personal tie with Kenjaku. Yuki doesn't necessarily have a personal tie with Yuji. Yuki necessarily doesn't have a personal tie with Sukuna. None of the connective threads really exist between Yuki and other characters on a character level. Todo hasn't appeared in over 100 chapters. The man's gone. That's the only character that Yuki's established to have a genuine relationship with. Suguru Geto, if you even want to call their interaction a relationship or dynamic, doesn't even exist anymore, as that was just Big Jaku. Yuki Tsukumo ultimately, despite being so important to a whole bunch of characters by all the narrative actions she does, doesn't actually do too much in terms of like actual character interactions and character depth and character dynamics. And I don't think she adds as much as Choso does, despite Choso adding relatively minimal stuff. But Choso's dynamic with Kenjaku is established. Choso's dynamic with Yuji is established. Choso's indirect dynamic with Sukuna is established. There's so many things you still get by having Choso around that I don't think Yuki would have unless you once again go back and add more. Unless you take that 1 month time skip and start filling that out with character interaction between Yuki and the rest. Whether you make it so that Yuki gets more active and starts training with characters like Maki, like Yuta, like Kashimo. Like you have to go in and do so much more. And just based on how JJK's pace, I don't think that would happen. I think Yuki would kind of, unironically, I feel like she'd just get the Kashimo treatment if she survived. Where she doesn't really get any character dynamics other than ones that are loosely hinted at, like Kashimo's dynamic with Akari and Kirara, and then she gets got. Or just becomes another accent piece. Because once again, in the same way that she was never beating Kenjaku, she was never beating Sukuna. So what do you get from her still being alive? She wasn't going to beat Kenny the first time. She wasn't going to beat Kenny again. She's not going to beat Sukuna. I don't know. I like, ultimately, I do see what he means in the sense that we get more out of Yuki, and definitely at this point, Choso's whole arc about like redeeming himself and living for his brothers and living for his living brother, yeah, technically all that's resolved at this point, but I still think there is more of a culmination and epilogue to that arc going on right now in the manga. So personally, I'd keep Choso over Yuki though, probably. Once again, because I'm thinking about it. If I were to just rewrite the back section of JJK, like from 200 onwards, if I were to rewrite it and flesh it out a bit more, then I'd want Yuki, because you can do more interesting stuff with Yuki. But just based on how Choso's been treated by the narrative since he's alive, as more so an accent piece continuing off previously established character relationships and arcs, I think the same thing would have to happen with Yuki, except unlike Choso, you didn't have previously existing character setups in arcs or dynamics. So I think ultimately, yeah, If the narrative's going to say the exact same way it is, I want Choso. I'm not drafting Yuki, which is crazy unfortunate considering how cool Yuki is. But let's see.
It would have been perfect for him. Another thing to consider is that Yuki's trump card would have probably been very effective against Sukuna, considering it's quite literally a black hole. While I don't think she would have killed him, she could have done a lot of damage before her death. It stated her will combined with Tengen's barriers stopped the attack from destroying the world. So have her damage him, but restrain it enough so she doesn't swallow Sukuna or the planet, and boom, problem solved. All in all, I think her service to the narrative is what saw more care than her actual involvement in the story. And it left me wondering why she received the treatment that she did.
But yeah, see, he even admits it. He even admits it. The idea of, yeah, you bring her around just to die. like you hold her off to have no more character interactions and just die against Sukuna. Like, don't get me wrong, the black hole is cool and I do think it'd be effective. But at the same time, it's like, what does that change? Does it make Yuki more involved as a character? I guess legally speaking, she has another fight. But she'd just be another jobber. And that's the thing. If we don't like Yuki for jobbing, having her job for Sukuna and Kenny would kind of just be more embarrassing. We're just putting another L on her record. I don't know. Especially since it'd be against a weakened Sukuna, it'd be even less impressive. So yeah, I don't know. I see what he means though. Hold on. I thought something was coming. It did not. But with it being the case, I see what he means. And he admits it. Well, not admits it. I say admits, like he was arguing against it. No, but he does say what I said. In terms of narrative impact, she does it. She has it. It's hard to argue she doesn't. But in terms of narrative presence, yeah, she's not really there. And I do agree with that. That is wasted potential considering how much narrative impact she has. Weight-wise, the distribution isn't equal in the same way that's more so equal for Gojo Satoru and his narrative presence, a Yuta Kotsu and his narrative presence, a Geto Suguru and his narrative presence. Yeah, it is unfair for Yuki. But once again, without a fundamental restructuring of the series, where you have to either add another miniature arc or a whole nother arc, or you have to flesh out certain things that Gege would never flesh out ever, I'm not sure what else you really get from Yuki. She served her purpose, which is sad and unfortunate. And really brutal when you think about it, but hey, it'd be like that when it'd be like that, especially when it'd be like that. But let's
service to the narrative is what saw more care than her actual involvement in the story. And it left me wondering why she received the treatment that she did. Hajime Kashimo.
Oh, why? In the quickly tackle, why did she receive that treatment, right? Like, you set up for a special grade, you spent all this time on her, why would you do all that? I see it for the same way Kashimo was set up for. The job to make Kenny seem really, really powerful. I feel like I feel like Gege views the characters in a lot more streamlined of a fashion than we do, and most authors do. Like, notably in the story that I'm writing, I have certain roles for characters. I have set up certain characters just to die. I've done it. I'm not proud about it. I even like some of the characters, but I know what their role is. And looking at the narrative from like a superlative or writer standpoint, I get why you introduce a character like Yuki, give her all she does, and have her do basically nothing in narrative, but have her be so important to the narrative. You get the best of both worlds. You don't actually have to develop the character all too much. You don't need to write any dynamics for her, and you get to make the character unique by having her not have too many dynamics. So, when you offer to job her for other more powerful characters, you get the benefit of this character is really, really strong and really, really important, but we didn't actually have to waste too much panel time, drawing. So, like, you technically get the best of both worlds. Where the character has impact, people will clearly like the character, people want to see more from the character, but you didn't actually waste too much time on the character and everything they stood for. And thusly, bada bing, bada boom, they get sacrificed with less impact. It's crazy, but it'd be like that when it'd be like that, especially when it'd be like that. That's how, if I had to guess it, if I were to, like, put myself in Gege's shoes, that's why I would do Yuki like that. Because, yeah, she's important, impossible to remove from the narrative, but as a character, in the narrative, more an accent piece. Something to make other characters better, stronger, worse, or more durable. not necessarily too much a character of herself. She's a verbatim definition, and Kashimo is too, of a tool character. And don't get me wrong, I say this in a lot of my critiques. I do have a couple scripts written talking about this concept. But every character in your narrative is a tool character to some degree. How much you let them break away from being a tool is by how much complexity and character interactions and character depth you give them. But Gege is very much an author that's like, this character has one purpose. Just like this pencil has one purpose. Once it fulfills that purpose, I'm done with it. I could do alternate designs on the pencil. I could interlink it with another pencil or swap out its eraser or do anything like that. I could customize it. But if I know the pencil's going to run out of lead to draw with in like 2 days, what's the point of doing all that? If it's going to serve its purpose and it serves it well enough, that's it. And that's what I feel about Yuki, and that's what I feel about Kashimo. They serve their narrative purpose. But let's see. Kashimo's going to be interesting, because once again, he's introduced 75-ish chapters later.
It was one of the numerous reasons Sukuna persisted in Jujutsu Kaisen. Fighting Hikari in chapter 185, he's an eccentric battle freak who seemingly loves to push his limits. His precise manipulation of cursed energy makes him a shining example when speaking on the topic, aside from Gojo. Pair this with his near insatiable lust for battle, and he becomes the perfect opponent for Hikari, who seemingly resonates with anyone who has fever. Despite Kashimo's clear expertise in cursed energy manipulation, what drew everyone to his character is his curse technique, which he only wanted to use against Sukuna. This brought a tidal wave of speculation regarding his curse technique. From Kirin to Godspeed, any popular lightning ability in anime and manga, Kashimo was fair game to have. However, what mattered most was if he could match up to Sukuna using it. Narrative arguments for and against CT Kashimo floated and bounced around the community at mass. A main detractor were his feats against Hikari, meaning his curse technique must amplify his power so greatly it would place him in the top tiers of the verse. Now, after 47 chapters, or in our time, 1 year, 2 months, and 14 days later, we got Kashimo's full power. Only for all this hype to be deflated in 2 chapters because Sukuna versus Gojo happened. Gojo vs Sukuna was far more anticipated than Kashimo vs Sukuna. Spanning 12 chapters filled to the brim with cliffhangers and never before seen tactics, everything anyone has ever wanted to see in a fight happens in this fight.
Yeah, hold on, I'm about to let him cook on this. But one thing, ironically enough, it's because I see a KH3 video or a Kingdom Hearts video right there. Kashimo and his unknown technique is the exact same thing that KH3 faced. Super crazy amounts of hype for something that was not destined to do what a lot of people wanted it to do. A big issue that a lot of people have with KH3, and even I had with it when it first happened, and realistically, when I got to the end of it, I was perfectly fine with KH3 as a whole when it came out, but when the issue I had, it got to the end and Sora hit the, I guess spoilers for KH3, but the game's 5 years old now. I think I'm more than viable. KH3 is half a decade old. How old am I? But that aside of my existential crisis, a big reason KH3 got a lot of dislike on a narrative level from a lot of fans, forgetting the whole gameplay aspect of it, just on a narrative level, is because it didn't feel nearly as conclusive as a lot of people wanted it to be. Heck, Xehanort appears he gets his own game right after KH3, and he's the final boss of Melody of Memory. The most major console release of a Kingdom Hearts game that we've gotten, which is also now 4 years ago. A lot of people weren't happy about that. It didn't feel necessarily anywhere near as conclusive. But if you were tapped in, if you were locked in the same way for Kashimo, if you were locked in to any of the interviewer statements or the developer statements, especially from Nomura himself, you knew KH3 wasn't going to be definitive. It wasn't going to be the end of the series. It was going to end an era. Did it do that well? No. Once again, Xehanort seems like he's going to have lasting ramifications, and I don't like that. But that's the thing with KH. We were told that it wasn't going to be the end. KH3 was not going to be the end of the series or anything like that. And same thing for Kashimo. The moment he was introduced as a random that was just really strong and he fought Hikari, we knew he was not going to beat Sukuna. Even if Gege didn't explicitly tell us, just like Nomura did with 3, Gege explicitly told us by having Kashimo do that. By setting up Kashimo as this random guy who's introduced really late into the narrative, no one no one should have believed, in my opinion. I give credit to those who did believe in spite of that, especially considering JJK had broken our ankles before, but narratively it just wouldn't make sense. That's why he even mentions narrative arguments. Narratively, it wouldn't make sense for him to beat Sukuna. And just like narratively, it wouldn't make sense for Cage 3 to be the actual ending when it's not the actual ending. So Kashimo, he kind of had that Cage 3 syndrome. He was hinted at to be something crazy, something next level. His CT is so powerful that he doesn't want to use it on anyone else but Ryoma and Sukuna. He runs into a character supposedly stronger than Yuta Akotsu on a roll while he's on a roll, and takes basically no damage by the end of the fight, only seemingly gets beaten when he does because of environmental hazard he had no control over, and was fighting with only 1/5 of his true potential the entire time. He has to be crazy, right? He has to be next level. But, no. He would never really had to be. And I didn't even think about it this way. Yeah, Kashimo had an impossible act to follow up. How do you top Gojo versus Sukuna? Right now, there are people who, and I don't necessarily fully blame them in some degree, but I don't think it's true, but a lot of people declare vehemently that JJK fell off the moment Gojo fell off, as in his top fell off, because it just wasn't to the same scale, wasn't to the same level. No one's as strong as Gojo and Sukuna, so no one's pushed Sukuna to the level that Gojo did, and apparently Gojo didn't push Sukuna at all. So, naturally, Kashimo had an impossible act to follow, unless you want to make him stronger than Gojo, but we weren't doing that because the narrative weight, the narrative cost of Kashimo being stronger than Gojo wouldn't have done anything good for the narrative. So Kashimo was destined to fail in every way. From the fact that he's not that important of a character, tertiary, if not quaternary at best, he had a secret technique, but he didn't use it against Sakari Kenji, who's also a really relevant but recently introduced character as a proper character, not just a flashback element, similar to Yuki Tsukumo, ironically enough. And it's just not his role, narratively, to beat Ryo and Sukuna. At best, it's Yuji's role, and Yuji isn't Kashimo. So yeah, Kashimo set up for failure from round start. It's why it's one of my few videos that is not aged like milk. I've actually, I'd say I'm like kind of 50-50 on some of my takes. My Kenny take, it's still the door's open again, but that's another video for another time. But for Kashimo, he had an impossible act, something that he could never, ever hope to overcome, a gap beyond gaps, and that's unfortunate. But it be like that when it be like that, especially when it be like that. So it's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate for Kashimo. I do wish he had more, though. Here's the thing, right? And this just comes to a personal preference of mine. I like Kashimo more than I like Yuki. If I were to do if I were to rate all the characters in JJK, I think, in terms of like how much I like them, and even in power, in the case of like mythical Phantom Beast and Kashimo, I would put Kashimo higher, in spite of Yuki's extreme narrative importance and how much she's contributed to a lot of my other favorite characters. It's just because I think Kashimo's cooler. I like lightning powers more than Yuki's punch and swing really, really hard. I do. But due to that, I see the same issue with Kashimo that you have with Yuki. Unless you restructure the narrative and add more bloat, not necessarily bloat, I do think it's be necessary to develop Kashimo more as a character and give him more dynamics, but unless you do that, which I don't think Gege would do, you can't give Kashimo more. You just can't. Gege did not want to flesh out that 1-month time skip. Gege didn't want to explore any more of the Gulling games. Gege ended it harshly. Didn't want to do the military plotline. The military plotline could have been the biggest thing for exploring a bunch of characters that survived post-Culling games, but we just didn't do that. So I think there's really no way to give Kashimo more. And once again, he serves his narrative role well. He made 4-armed, hand-body Sukuna look perfect, look almighty, look jacked, juicy, and scrumdiddlyumptious, if you will. And that was his role. He served it well. So what am I going to get on his case for? I can't necessarily. He has wasted potentials, and I feel like he could have done so much more, but narratively he can't. He could have done more in another story, where there was more time and the author was actually interested in it. But in terms of what Kashimo was put into the narrative to do, expedite the Culling games, and job for Sukuna.
Sukuna even gets more powerful afterwards, leading to 2 questions. How could Kashimo possibly follow that up? And how could he even begin to do anything like Gojo or Sukuna? Jujutsu Kaisen has teased this fight since chapter 3. Kashimo's best feats were being above Hikari and feeling engaged after witnessing Gojo and Sukuna's fight. That was all anyone had to say about him. No solid ground to stand on, only hope on a tightrope. And a lot of fans knew this. For Kashimo, it was never a matter of if, but when and how long. Especially after Sukuna's newly developed space-cutting attacks, victory was never in the cards for Kashimo, so just like Yuki, he fell flat on his face before his run in the story even truly started. His curse technique stipulation of killing him upon completion in conjunction with his desire to use it only against Sukuna serves as a 1-2 punch for his character. Kashimo is placed in a losing position story-wise and is vaguely above Hikari's level of power, which shouldn't compare to Gojo, who clears Hikari 10 times out of 10. Sukuna's amp in his own curse technique's downside, the final nail in his coffin would be Sukuna's character. He represents a being that has departed any limitation placed upon him, human, curse spirit, or otherwise. He exists to be on a different level of power than anyone else in Jujutsu Kaisen. As I did with Yuki, I want to give a better way to use his character that makes sense to me, which comes with 2 changes and 1 constant. Do not hold back his technique for Sukuna at all, don't make it one use, and play him as another strong man to be defeated.
I agree with that. I think ultimately locking off Kashimo's technique from but here, you know the thing is though? If that's the case, then I get why Gege did it though, narratively. Because if he uses his technique against Hikari, Hikari should die. And if Hikari doesn't die, or lose the fight, then what happens? Kashimo has to lose that fight against Hikari, or else the points don't get transferred and the plot can't happen. So that's a hard thing. You kind of have to keep it to one use. You can't let Kashimo, or, because here's the thing, if he uses let's say he uses the technique against Hikari, and they equal out, they tie, then that you run into the same narrative issue, where Kashimo can't be a threat to Sukuna. We've seen your technique, bro. We've seen your tech. We know it. Say he maybe doesn't use domain expansion. Even still, we know where your limits are, bro. You're a jackpot Hikari level threat. Unfortunate, little bro, you just ain't that guy. That's the thing. You're gonna lose something regardless. Kashimo, he's born to fail because his narrative role of expediting the culling games and losing to Sukuna is locked in. So by saving his technique, or not saving his technique, I still think he does a disservice. If anything, folding his technique into a one-hit, one-slaughter kind of thing, it makes sense. And one thing I'll admit, Kashimo as a character is completed by the end of his run with Sukuna. The ability to finally receive love, finally be weaker than somebody else, is exactly what Kashimo really wanted in his heart and core. Even Sukuna notes this before he body bags Kashimo. He's like, oh, I see what you want. Don't worry, I'll give it to you. You were strong, right? And he does that. So Kashimo, once again, does get completed. In a way that I'll admit Yuki doesn't get completed. Yuki, her narrative role gets completed, and in fact, it gets expedited after the fact with the soul-seizing punches. But, like, arguably, not even arguably, Yuki just doesn't get completed. Her goal doesn't get met. We don't know if her goal is going to get met. It seems unlikely at this point. But it's a door that's open. It's kind of like Gojo. His falling and his ideology is technically still fighting, even though he himself has fallen. So Yuki's ideology still has a chance to be proven and, like, breaking everyone away from curse energy. That is still possible. But Kashimo, he is a character that's introduced, destined to die, and completed by his death. The idea of love and how that ties into Sukuna and the connections born between the strong, all of that serves what Kashimo is generally meant to be. And he gets that. So Kashimo gets completed in a way that Yuki unfortunately never did, which is ironically a point towards his character that comes in spite of his flaws. Let's see. That first one, I give my thoughts.
Kashimo can still want to fight Sukuna, but it won't be the center of his character. Rather, he just wants to fight strong opponents and will be more willing to use his curse technique against Hikari. This would also make sense of his 2-chapter death against Sukuna because we as an audience got to see everything about him before he was killed off. Kashimo dying as easily as he did should have been expected. Sukuna has been this world's strongest for so long, eclipsing anyone who felt isolated by their own power. He shows them that he is this world's ceiling, and Kashimo has no other choice but to look up at him. Whether he'd waited 10 or 1,000 years, closing a power gap that vast may have just been impossible for him. Yuki Tsukumo getting slaughtered should have been expected. Kenjaku's desire for human evolution spanned lifetimes and centuries. Yuki remained undecided until she finally found her answer to chase. But she was just grasping at a spark flickering in the darkness with zero experience in pursuing it. Yuki and Kashimo were 2 characters I personally expected a lot from. Yuki was the first modern day special grade, so having her killed in the only 6 chapters we get to see her fight in is just sad. Kashimo getting 47 chapters of build-up only to hit a brick wall is even more disheartening. This leads me to think that by building them up and giving them impressive powers we hardly get to see fully explored, leaves both in an everlasting state of wasted potential.
And that's the thing. Though, fantastic video though. I will be checking out more. I see a Yuki to analysis, and I will be watching that for the channel. But big thing, gargantuan thing, next level thing. I agree. In terms of the completion of their movesets, absolutely. Wasted potential, undeniably. We don't know if Kashimo had a maximum or domain or anything like that. We don't know. And you can't just say, oh, well, he can only use the technique once or twice. That means he can't have a domain. Mahito came with a domain on the spot. Characters have come with domains on the spot. Kashimo could have easily had one. He could have had a cursed technique reversal if he had RCT. We didn't explore any of that. I agree. And Yuki Tsukumo, once again, unless you think the black holes are maximum, no maximum. We never got to see her domain expansion. We know she has RCT. She could have a cursed technique reversal. We didn't get to see that. I agree. That is just pure waste of potential. But that comes from a power standpoint and a power scaling standpoint and the levels of their abilities. In terms of what they are and what narrative roles they played, there's nothing else you can give them. There's nothing else you can give them without sacrificing other characters in their narrative or adding more and starting to create more characters who would arguably cause problems. Because you have to give Yuki another fight. But who's she fighting? No one else exists. Without taking away one of Yuta's fights, without taking away one of Yuji's fights, taking away one of Megumi's fights, nothing else exists. You have to make something new. And then what happens to that character? They become fodder for Yuki's growth. Which is necessary. I do think you need to have characters like that. That's what Ryu was for. That's what Ura was for. But still, it's unfortunate. Same thing for Kashimo. You have to give him another fight. But where do you give him? What do you hand him? From where? How? Why? I don't know. It's an impossible conundrum. It's a catch-22 that can never be caught. Because no matter what, a character either needs to be added, or a character that already exists in the narrative needs to lose something, or time needs to be added to give these characters more character dynamics, to give them more. But I think Gege setting them up as they did, extremely powerful, extremely important, but mainly built to expedite the narrative, and ultimately job. They served that job well. I can't say any of that potential is wasted because it all gets used, and it gets used well enough. But still, that's what I think. Please tell me what you guys think in the comment section down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, please do me a favor and leave Gravity Strike. Leave Gravity Strike in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that little notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have an application down below where you can support me for as low as $1 a month. You things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks will include the live reaction to the very next chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen, ad-free variations of all my videos, and if you become a $25 patron and $25 member, you can order whatever video you want. And if you want to make a one-time video request or a one-time donation, the link to my Ko-Fi is also in the description down below. And now, thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is Dagger the Pencil, writing off. I would like to give a thank you to all $3 members: O'Connor Plays, Greyhound, Atkins Void, Astro, Eternal Flame, Red Wolf 4765, G Prosper, and Paris Arnold. And I'd like to give a thank you to our $5 patrons: Steron, Sean, Midnight Lord 21, Kevin, and Igneel. And I'd like to give a big old thank you to our $7 members: Autumn Mornings Lazo and Sick Addiction. And I'd like to give a big old thank you to our $10 member, Robbie Uchiha. And I'd like to give a gargantuan thank you to our $10 patrons: Panda Goat, Joaquin, and Idemokami. And I'd like to give a gargantuan scrumdiddlyumptious thank you to our $25 patron, ChinaDoll09. And I'd like to give another gargantuan gargantuan I have no idea what that word. Thank you to our $25 patron, Calvin Elder.